I was at school on that normal day. Classes were proceeding as usual. However, everything changed when the lockdown alarm echoed through the hallways. Our teachers instructed us to hide under the desks in absolute silence. As we were there, the lights flickered and the atmosphere became tense. Worried whispers spread among the students as we awaited news. We heard unfamiliar footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. Time seemed to drag on, and uncertainty hung in the air. Only distant whispers of teachers trying to reassure students could be heard. Suddenly, a chilling sound echoed as if something heavy was being dragged through the corridors. Fear consumed all of us, and my mind wandered to old stories of paranormal events at school. As the silence persisted, I noticed shadows moving around me, indistinct figures that disappeared as soon as I tried to focus my gaze on them. A shiver ran down my spine, and my heart pounded uncontrollably. In the dark confinement of the classroom, I began to hear whispers, indistinct voices echoing like a ghostly murmur. Shadows danced on the walls, creating an even more surreal atmosphere. Suddenly the light flickered, and for a brief moment the room plunged into complete darkness. In that instant I could swear I saw a pale, shadowy figure gliding through the room. My heart seemed to freeze as the figure moved silently. The whispers intensified, becoming almost audible. I could barely breathe as I tried to understand what was happening. Each tick of the clock felt like an eternity. Finally, after an agonizing wait, the announcement that the lockdown had been lifted brought a collective sigh of relief. As we left the room, I looked around, but the shadows and whispers disappeared as mysteriously as they had appeared. Even though the official explanation was a security incident, the feeling that something supernatural had occurred lingered in the memories of all of us. The school returned to normal, but the experience of that lockdown would haunt our thoughts for a long time. On a rainy day, the school was shrouded in an atmosphere of mystery. The lockdown announcement echoed through the corridors, and everyone hurried to their classrooms, feeling the tension in the air. The lights flickered as we locked ourselves in the darkness. The sound of rain hitting the windows echoed like a sinister soundtrack. In the darkness, I began to notice distorted shadows moving in impossible ways. A sense of malevolent presence hung in the air, and my heart beat irregularly. As we were immersed in oppressive silence, a guttural whisper filled the room, seeming to emerge from the shadows. "Hides but cannot escape!" The voice hissed, sending shivers down my spine. Suddenly the walls seemed to exude a supernatural coldness. A dark figure, almost invisible, slid through the rows of desks. I tried to scream, but the sound got stuck in my throat as the shadowy presence drew near. The air became heavy, and an intense feeling of despair settled in. Shadows writhed on the walls like living creatures. The whisper turned into a somber chorus, echoing indistinct words that sowed fear. When the lights finally restored and the lockdown was lifted, the room was empty, with no signs of the shadowy. The skull back to normal, but the memories of that experience would haunt my dreams, leaving me with the unsettling doubt about what really happened that day. On that day, the atmosphere in the school was dark and tense. An urgent announcement echoed through the speakers, instructing everyone to lock themselves in the classrooms. Uncertainty hung in the air, and everyone's heart was pounding rapidly. We sat in silence with the lights off, while outside the world seemed to disappear. Unlike the usual buzz of classmates in the hallways, there was an eerie silence. The reason for the lockdown remained unknown. As we waited, I began to notice something strange. A subtle chill hung in the air, despite the heating working normally. Shadows danced on the walls, contorting in ways that defied any logical explanation. Suddenly a shiver ran down my spine as I heard a whisper nearby, so close that it seemed to be inside the room. "You are not alone," murmured a soft voice. I looked around, but there was no one except my huddled classmates. The minutes dragged on, each shadow and whisper intensifying the feeling that something beyond comprehension was happening. Fear settled in deeply as we waited for any news about what was happening outside. When the announcement finally came that the lockdown had been lifted, we left the room with a mix of relief and apprehension. Normality returned to the school, but the shadows and whispers lingered in our memories, leaving us with unanswered questions and an unsettling feeling that something beyond the visible had been witnessed that day. On a foggy night, the school plunged into an unsettling silence. When the lockdown announcement echoed through the corridors. We rushed to take refuge in the classrooms, and the lights began to flicker, creating an atmosphere of suspense. In the suffocating darkness, shadows twisted, taking on indescribable forms. A supernatural presence hung in the air, and inaudible whispers echoed as if invisible entities were conspiring around us. Suddenly, an old map on the wall came to life, revealing a dark landscape unfolding before my eyes. A ghostly figure with burning eyes emerged from the paper, moving in inexplicable ways around the room. Fear gripped my chest. The whispers evolved into eerie murmurs, narrating stories of a dark past and buried secrets. The air became electrically charged, as if something ominous was about to manifest. When the lights flickered back on and the lockdown was lifted, the room was quiet, with no sign of the figure or the murmurs. Normalcy returned to the school, but the memory of that foggy night would continue to haunt my thoughts, leaving me with the feeling that something beyond explanation had occurred in those dark hours. A grey afternoon, the school was suddenly enveloped in a sombre atmosphere. When the lockdown announcement reverberated through the hallways, we hurried to take shelter in the classrooms, and the light flickered, creating dancing shadows on the walls. In the silent confinement, the shadows came to life, taking on unsettling and distorted forms. A chilling sensation filled the air, while eerie whispers mingled with echoes of unknown footsteps in the empty corridors. Suddenly, a blackboard became a window to the unknown. Hazy images of spectral figures floated on the surface, observing us with expressionless eyes. I tried to look away, but the vision persisted, as if trying to convey a message beyond comprehension. Whispers turned into melancholic murmurs, revealing forgotten stories and buried tragedies. The air became dense, as if the very room absorbed the shadows that twisted around us. When the lights came back on and the lockdown was lifted, the room seemed normal again. However, the feeling that something supernatural had permeated that space would linger, leaving a lasting impression that the boundaries between the real world and the unknown had been momentarily challenged.